Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast with Blaha. And eating some of this Greek yogurt. Very insulinogenic food. So let's talk about this. All right, I've seen people in the comments lately bring up to me and say, Jason, there are people who are saying that whey protein is bad because it produces a very large insulin spike. And that word spike is silly. It's not a spike, meaning it produces an insulin response. Okay, yeah, that's true. Now, I don't want people to think I'm even defending whey protein or saying it's the most amazing thing. I don't even drink it. I've used protein at different points in the past. I have not had a protein shake at all this year. Like we're halfway through the year and I haven't had any protein this year. I hit my 605 squat on no protein. Well over 20 pounds into my cut right now, consuming no protein powder. So I'm not saying, hey, whey protein's great, you should go out and buy it or whatever. It's just another protein source. I prefer food I can chew a little bit, especially cutting. But yeah, it produces a large insulin response, but so does all protein. All right, and it kind of flies in the face of this whole insulin obesity hypothesis, which has been largely debunked. Like no real dietitian or researcher really believes in this anymore. All right. High circulating insulin levels themselves do not cause body fat storage. And that's the concern. People are like, oh, there's going to be a fat gain from it, or it's going to blunt losing body fat. Okay, that's not true in healthy, active people. High circulating insulin levels are indicative of medical disorders, right? And when we start thinking of stuff like high circulating insulin, we start thinking of things like insulin resistance. This isn't caused by the foods you eat. It's caused by becoming obese and maybe eating certain foods on your path to obesity. Okay, this is a side effect of people getting fat. It's not the cause. A lot of people say, yeah, but a lot of really obese people, they have terrible insulin sensitivity. The majority of them do, yeah. But it's not the insulin sensitivity that caused them to be obese. It's being obese that causes the high circulating insulin levels. This is a case of which came first, the chicken or the egg. No, this happens as a result of being fat. It's not the cause of being fat. It's surplus calories. Certain foods can contribute more than others on your way there. But in moderation, those foods don't even cause it. Right? What are we talking about? Large amounts of refined fructose, maybe excessive saturated fat intake, right? Things like this. In moderation, these foods don't even contribute to this, though. And that's what people need to understand. There's a quantitative aspect to those things. For everyone else, insulin is a good thing. It's a good thing. It's if you are physically active, and you don't have to be a true athlete for this to occur. You don't have to train as hard as I train. You don't have to train with the volumes I train. You don't have to do the amount of cardio that I do. And I know people who do a hell of a lot more than I do. And more props to them. I know people who do a lot more. I do an hour of cardio a day. I know people who that's nothing for them. But they're endurance athletes who also lift and stuff. I'm friends with guys like Viata and some of his hybrid people. I'm friends with several of them. Yeah, those people are insane with their workloads every week. But you don't have to be at that level. If you lift weights regularly and you do a little bit of light cardio, that's it. If that will cause this response that we want to where insulin becomes a good thing. Right? Insulin, if you train, insulin is more anabolic to your muscle tissue than it is to your fat tissue. So insulinogenic foods are good for gaining muscle. And that includes proteins. Let's come back over to that point. Yes, all protein produces a robust insulin response. All protein. Is anyone here really thinking that, man, I'm just going to get fat from eating protein? Well, that's not what the research shows. Research generally shows that people who train who eat more protein tend to have better body composition. Most of you out there are eating high protein if you're training. There's a good reason for it. Right? There's a good reasons for you to be doing that. So using that logic, all these people who diet down on high protein diets, they should be struggling to lose body fat. They aren't, because protein helps preserve muscle tissue. So does insulin. All right. Anyone who follows real athletes, step away from just the physique world where it's a lot of brown rice. Plenty of dietitians write about this all the time, that athletes in general prefer white rice to brown rice. Right? Most athletes eat white rice. It's very common, one of the most common staples around the world for high-level athletes. Literally around the world, every sport. Go look at Olympic athletes. Why white rice? Doesn't upset their GI tract. It's a simple glucose-based carb, easy to digest, extremely easy to digest, produces straight glucose, right? No real fructose here, liver's not having to process anything. Straight training fuel with a high insulin response. That's what you want. That's desirable because it goes to your muscle tissue. Insulin and insulinogenic foods shuttle glucose and nutrients into your muscle tissue. Foods that have a large insulin response are desirable for training. They're desirable for gaining muscle. They're desirable for retaining muscle. That's why when studies, and I saw Alan Aragon post this like a decade ago, I've been friends with him forever, some studies showing that when people are in a calorie deficit, they took a bunch of healthy young men, the young men had higher nitrogen retention if they consumed white rice instead of brown rice. Well, what does that mean? Why does that matter? It shows how much muscle you're retaining. Like it shows how much protein you're breaking down for fuel. And the ones who ate white rice used less protein for fuel. And that means they're preserving muscle protein better. In other words, white rice has been shown in these studies to preserve muscle in a calorie deficit better than brown rice. Larger insulin response. Larger insulin response. This is a good thing. It's an extremely good thing. And you're not spiking it because, again, healthy, active people don't see spikes in your insulin no matter what you do. You see it gradually rise up. But it's good. Why would you be against that? It's anabolic. And it's more anabolic to your muscle than to your fat. So if you think of it from that perspective, it's technically better for body composition. Right? This is desirable. Highly active people do not need to fear an insulin response from their food. They need to actually welcome it. Right? Particularly between bouts of training. I wouldn't say just post-workout, because post-workout, it's not as important as people think it is unless you're training twice a day. If you go do cardio after your weightlifting, yeah, it does become important, doesn't it? So particularly around your training, these sort of foods are a good thing. You should be consuming them. It's not something you should be afraid of or think of it as a bad way. In fact, it's the opposite. You should see that and say, aha, higher insulin response food, better for muscle growth, better for recovery. I should be eating that. And no, that's not a blanket statement to go eat a bunch of table sugar, because that's different. Totally different scenario. Talking about glucose-heavy foods. Because the fructose is slower to replenish muscle tissue. Not necessarily ideal. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.